So, good morning, Shalom. Nice to have you here. This is our third introductory class to Kabbalah. Kabbalah being the Jewish esoteric wisdom, the Jewish mystical wisdom that has been part and parcel of the wisdom of Judaism and the wisdom of Torah from the very beginning, but is only gradually being revealed, and it's actually only in the last 200, 300 years that an actual revolution of beginning to reveal this hidden wisdom and make it accessible to Jews has only happened, only in the past, to the majority of Jews, not to the select few who would go into these topics and study them. And now we actually want to expand it more and reveal this wisdom to the world and teach it to everyone who's interested and wants to know what this very old and deep texts have to say. And for the first two meetings we spoke a little bit about the history of Kabbalah, the different stages of how it developed, and then we introduced some very basic concepts, the concept of infinite light, Or Ein Sof, that is the description of divinity of God before the creation of the world. It was just an infinite light, a perfect being. But then we explained that the very concept of perfection and of an infinite being in and of itself reveals that there is something inherently imperfect about it, which is that it lacks the experience of imperfection. And so from this very simple paradox or concept that for a perfect being to be truly perfect, it needs to experience imperfection and the process of perfection, of perfecting in the way to perfection, then this is why the world is created. The world is created as a sort of metaphorical void within divinity, and that void being an empty space in which God is forgotten, so to speak. And then remembering divinity within this void enables this infinite perfection to become even more perfect, because then there is a process of not knowing and then knowing again, and longing for something and then reaching that something, or experiencing lack of something and then the experience of filling that lack, or fulfilling that lack. And we said that we liken this to two forms of light. There is a light that has always been a light. These are things that I already know, things that are obvious to me. And it's the same for God. There was infinite light and he knew himself perfectly. But then there is another kind of light that comes from darkness, or by virtue of going into the darkness and finding the light hidden within it. And this light, not only does it have the value of novelty, but it is actually a deeper kind of light. And this is why it's first hidden within darkness. It's not something that can naturally, intuitively be discovered or known or felt. And this is why, according to this idea, this picture, the reason the world was created and the reason now we live in this world within the physical body and have to deal with physical difficulties and have to try and make it work, build a world, build a home, build a family, raise children within this physical world, is that we discover the deeper kind of divine light that comes not only from above but from below, from within life itself, within reality. And this is generally, very generally speaking, the purpose of the world. So the definition was that God wanted to dwell in the lower worlds or lower realms, and it's our purpose to make this world a habitat, a place where God feels at home. If the world forgets God, if the world just lives its own life and the stars move and things are as they are, then this is a world that has, in a very deep way, forgotten God. It's forgotten its infinite source, that it comes from something which has to do with knowledge of deep things and knowledge of itself in a deep way. And so the purpose of mankind, at the very end, the ultimate purpose, is to make this world a dwelling place for God. And this is the Kabbalistic explanation for what the Torah, the revealed Torah, is trying to do. Why all these commandments, why all these sanctions, why build a temple, and why have certain deeds done and not done. And the deeper explanation is that all this is in order to somehow create a form of life, a kind of life for the individual and for the family and for the community and for the entire humanity at the end, that acknowledges its divine source, and it lives within it. It pulsates with divinity in a very conscious manner. And all the prophets talk about the end of days and redemption. They talk about a world that knows where it comes from, knows what its true nature. And then it's able to connect with this infinite source of creativity and creation, and be part of the Creator, be part of creating divinity, creating reality, making this world more and more the home of God. Now, and we spoke about there being a diminishment or a tzimtzum, and a pushing out of the light, of the infinite light, in order to create a space, metaphorically speaking. And then God takes a single light of line or a thread of line, and He gradually lets it enter the void, and from this line the worlds are created. Now, there are a lot of worlds. Each world is like a circle. Each circle is like a world view, or like a certain level of understanding of the world, and then there are smaller and smaller worlds. And we live in a small world, in the smallest of and most distant of worlds, but we can expand our consciousness and expand our understanding of the world. And each time we expand and we grow, then we build another circle, or we reach another circle of understanding, another level of meaning, another level of understanding things. And we want to expand, and then we move towards the ultimate circle, which is divinity, which, so to speak, surrounds the world. Although it's at the same time, it's also present within the world. Now, the highermost world is called the world of Atzilut in Hebrew, and the translation is the world of emanation. Emanation is a stage preceding creation. Creation, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, gives the world a very basic kind of independence and separateness from Creator. It's a dualistic picture of a creator and a creation. Shaniat, you can close the door. Creation experiences itself as somehow distinct from the Creator. But before creation, there is a stage called emanation. Emanation is God, so to speak, overflowing or expanding and creating something other than itself. And this is like the line of light that is just pouring out of God and creating the first world. And in this world, the experience of world and the experience of God are one. It's one experience. It's already a world. It's not divinity itself. It's the highest level of consciousness if we climb from our own earthly consciousness. But and this consciousness is a consciousness that I am absolutely part of God, and I have no independent self-consciousness as something separate from God. So this world is the highest of worlds, and this world contains the concept that is presented in Genesis, but is very hard to understand, which is the image of God. Man is created in the image of God. All the Torah is about how God does not have an image, and one must not make an idol of God. And Abraham, the first patriarch, smashed all his father's idols. This is the traditional story, that his father would sell idols. And Abraham realized that divinity is beyond, and he was the first iconoclast, and he broke his father's idols. And then there is a very important one of the second of the 10 commandments is not to make an image of God in any way. And not to paint him like an old man with a beard or anything else. But at the very beginning of the story, when the first man and woman are created, it is said that they were created in the image of God. So how is this explained? So the idea is that the image of God is not an actual image, but it's not also something absolutely abstract. There is, between this world, the world of plurality, with its infinite amount of beings and shapes and colors and forms, and between the abstract, unattainable divinity, which cannot, no picture of which can be made and no concept of which can be perceived, there is a mediating level. This is the world of emanation. And in the world of emanation, there is a kind of structure, or a kind of map, or a kind of pattern, a kind of process, a very, very primordial process. But this is the image of God. It's not an image in the sense of a particular face and a particular name, but it's not something totally abstract either. It's made up of 10 emanations, and in Hebrew they are called the Sefirot. Sefirot is close to the English word sphere, as in circle, and also sapphire, which is a kind of diamond through which light shines. So Sefirot has to do with channels of light, or of energy. The one unattainable God is suddenly divided into 10 emanations, which are structured in a particular way, and they have a particular dynamic to them. And this is considered to be the most fundamental dynamic of how things evolve, of how things grow, of how things are shaped, of how things are ordered in all the lower worlds up to finally our own world and our own bodies and our own souls. So when we talk about the Sefirot, we're talking about the most fundamental structure to exist, according to Kabbalah. And so 10 emanations, 10 forces, 10 channels of divine light, and they're built in a particular way. That means they have a particular order. And this is what we have before us here. And
just to remind me, so it's a universal model.
Yes.
But it just happens to be in the Jewish tradition, but it's actually universal.
Yes,
of
yes.
all men.
Yes, of all men. And the Kabbalists were the people to perceive it. It's hinted at in the Torah and in the prophets in many ways. These words are all appear as clusters of concepts within the Torah and then within the later books of the prophets, within the Tanakh, what Christians call the Old Testament. And the concepts are all there, and in many ways the patterns are buried there. But then it was only in the book of Formation, the first Kabbalistic book, the book of Yetzirah, that their structure is presented, and their names are not yet presented, but just the structure, and it's not illustrated, it's just described. But when you follow it carefully, closely, then you see it creates, if you read it and then you follow it, and you see it creates a pattern. And then later on in the book of the Zohar, the names are given and talked about at length, at great length. But the idea is, and also, you might say that different wisdoms have intimations of this structure. So for example, the ladder of chakras and other concepts of a ladder of being, a chain of being, the great chain of being, if you're familiar with the concept, and many forms of hierarchies of channels or emanations or levels of divine light. But there's something about this structure which is a little bit more complex about them, and it has to do with the fact that it's divided not according to one line, but according to 3 lines. And it is explained that at first, when the emanations came forward, they came in linearly, and they weren't structured like this. So now it goes from the top down and from the right to the left. So it's counterintuitive to English-speaking people, or anyone who speaks a Latin or Greek language. So you have to look at this from the right to the left. So Chokhmah precedes Bina, and Chesed precedes Gevurah. Okay? So the order is this. It's Keter, which means crown, and then Chokhmah, which means wisdom, Bina, which means understanding, Da'at, knowledge, Chesed, which is loving kindness or grace, and then Gvura is might. Tiferet, which can be translated either as beauty or harmony, or glory sometimes also. Netzach is victory. Hod, acknowledgement. Yesod is foundation. And Malchut means kingdom. All these translations are with a grain of salt, because actually the words have, all of them have at least 2 or 3 meanings, which are connected, but you need to have all of them in order to understand what the Sefirah captures. So this is the best. This is what we use when we translate them into English books, but then there needs to be quite a few explanations for each force and why they're shaped in this particular way. And so we have, you can see that we have a sort of zigzag movement here, because if we go like this, and then like this, right? And then here, and here, and here, right? And then here, and then finally here, and this goes straight.
Also between loving kindness and mind. Straight. No, sorry, sorry.
I put it. So we have a zigzag line that goes like this. If we go from the top down, we can also travel, so to speak, from the bottom up, and then the arrows will be reversed. It will be the same channel. But also, there are actual channels between each and every Sefirah, or at least there are channels between each Sefirah and its adjacent Sefirot. Sefirah in the singular, Sefirot in the plural. So Ot is the plural of a feminine noun. Sefirah is a feminine noun, just like French. There are feminine and masculine nouns, and Sefirah, emanation, is a feminine noun, and Sefirot is the plural.
So you're saying it's a feminine emanation? No.
The word Sefirah is a feminine noun. Now there's a channel here, and there are channels here and here, right, like this, and so on. Right, and here, and here. And this is what you can see in the poster. You can see all the channels. And there are actually more than one system of how the channels are organized, but for the time being, we don't go into the channels right now. Now, if you count, you'll see there aren't 10 emanations, there are actually 11. And the reason there are 11 is something we need to explain a little bit further on. It has to do with this particular one. Sometimes you see the Sephirotic system without this, sometimes you see it with this. Because this is a special Sephirah, and we'll have to explain this later on. So, so I said that there are intimations of this because all the other mystical systems that I know of that have a hierarchy of channels or levels or degrees, they're all one-dimensional. And in Kabbalah it's explained that at first when these emanations are coming out of God, they're coming out in a linear way, as one line. So then you have Keter, and then Chokhmah, and then Binah, and then Dat, and it's just one line, and then it's 10 or 11, like a spinal cord. But then, as the world becomes, we spoke about this yesterday, less chaotic and more rectified, more organized, then they're divided, they're spread across 3 vertical lines. And so this is called the right line, and the left line, and the center line. Right, this is the first line, like this. It has 3 Sefirot, and this one also has 3, and this one has 4 or 5, depending on whether we count this, right? So this is a little bit, has some brackets around it, so to speak. because it's a special kind of Sefirah. It has to do, well, we'll talk about it later on. So the first thing we can see about this is let's just see a structure here. If we take away the Keter and the Malchut, the crown and the kingdom, which obviously are connected because a king has a crown and a king rules over a kingdom, so there's some mysterious connection between the first emanation and the last emanation. If we take them out, we see a very simple structure. We see this dynamic repeating itself 3 times. And we have 1, 2, 3. There's the Chokhmah Bina Dat triangle, the Chesed Gvura Tiferet triangle, and the Netzach Hod Yesod triangle. 3 times this dynamic. And then the Keter becomes a sort of prelude or introduction or something that sets the tone or begins this process. And then the Malchut becomes a sort of, they're like bookends. It becomes something that comes out of this process. This 3 times 3 process of right, left, middle, right, left, middle, right, left, middle, and then boom, something comes out of it. Something emerges, a new fruit, a new understanding, a new implementation of something. And only when there is a malchut, when there is a kingdom, when something comes in the end, then the keter, we realize what it was there for all along. The crown only makes sense when it's placed on the head of a king, which has a kingdom. And then when the kingdom operates and looks up to its king, and the vision of the king is realized in the kingdom, or the shepherd, or the teacher, then the crown makes sense and it sort of glows, so to speak. It's happy. This is what I wanted from the very beginning. So we see a deep connection between the keter and the malchut, the crown and the kingdom.
So the kingdom is at the base.
Yes,
in a sense.
Yeah, the kingdom is the ultimate fruit or product or goal of this entire process when you go from the top down. But you can also, it's like a map. It's like a map that you can grow in all channels.
Yeah.
But the red line, the arrows, show you the main line. It's like a bus that goes through all the stops, and not just part of them. And it can go either, you can imagine going down it or going up it. So if you think about living in this world and then realizing there's something greater than this world, you start in kingdom and you grow up. But if you think about having a vision and you want to realize that vision, this is also the map of the soul and the map of your body. And I'll show this in a minute. So then you go from the top, then you go from the crown to the malchut.
It feels for me like a descension and ascension, if that makes sense.
Well, because the will of the crown, the desire of the crown is to be realized within malchut, then the process of descent has some ascent to it in the sense that you're progressing. You're progressing towards your goal, but you don't feel like it's an ascent. You feel like you're going more and more into reality and more into actualization. But the desire of your soul is to be actualized. So let's just go a little bit more into this. So, in the world of emanation, when these are divine powers, so again, in the beginning, this is the first pattern of reality and the first pattern of the world, and this is how it is in the world of emanation. When it goes down, it is also reflected within our body and within our soul. This is a simple map of the body, and I'll show what it means. The crown is the root of the soul. It is, so to speak, above the head. We each have a crown, and this is what many people in the world experienced or are experiencing as people having a halo or having some light around their heads. And this comes from the idea that there is something beyond the head or above the head, so to speak, and this is the root of our soul. This is the kernel of our being. This is the highermost part of ourselves, and it wants to filter in or go into our consciousness and be revealed, but it's still unattainable, and it's above, and even it's hard for us to perceive it most of the time. And using Freud's term of subconscious, we can call this the superconscious. It's the superconscious, it's above consciousness and it's above the intellect. Then the first triad would be the head, the brain. So Chokhmah would be the right hemisphere, and Binah would be the left hemisphere. And then that would either be the stem, the brain stem, or the neck, or the cerebellum, the brain that's at the back, and that's not divided into right and left. And it would be something that connects the intellect with the next level, which is the emotion. So the first triad is intellect. This is the intellectual level. Right? Intellect. With that being the bridge or the neck. And this is the superconscious.
Can you go over the colors or Can you go over the colors of them or not here?
What do you mean the colors?
Like what colors, Keter, what colors?
No, not now. They're also associated with colors, but it's a complex topic in and of itself. So, and then the next triad, right, this, is the triad of emotion. Chesed is like the right arm, and it's considered to be the arm of giving, of hugging, of pulling oneself, other people closer to me. Gvura, the left hand, is the hand that pushes away, that creates distance, that creates borders. They're all good, by the way. They can all be turned bad. All these powers have a negative variation to them. But they're essentially all good. But they balance each other out. And then Tiferet would be the body itself, which holds it all together. Third triad is the behavioral. Behavior. Netzach is the right leg. Hod is the left leg, the limbs that move us forward in the world. Yesod would be the procreative organs. So there is a female Yesod and a male Yesod. And the main images of the male Yesod, which is like a channel that takes all these powers and creates a seed, creates something that can live. But it also can be likened to a woman giving birth to a child through the procreative organ. And then the Malchut would be the things that we do. How we are actually in the world, what we give to the world, what we do, and the world itself that we face. Malchut can be understood as everything around me, and also the things that I do and say, which the moment I say them or do them, they're part of the world. They leave me and they become part of the world. This is Malchut. So this is, you can see it's a sort of image of the body. This is why it's the image of God. There's a head, and there's a body, and the body has 4 limbs, and then the procreative organ, and then there's what we do in the world, which is Malchut. And Keter is their soul root at the top. When we talk about these emanations not as a map of the soul, but as a map, as the first pattern of existence in divinity, then Keter would be the point in which the world of emanation is connected to divinity itself. Keter can be seen as part of divinity or as part of the world. And then Chokhmah Binah Dat would be like God thinking within himself or planning the world. And then you have 7 more channels which are divided into 2 triads and then a 7th special Sefirot. So this corresponds to God creating the world in 7 days. 6 days of work and a day of rest. And this is the pattern behind it. The pattern behind it is that first he plans, this is before the creation of the world, then in that he makes the decision to make the world, to turn this plan into a reality. This is why there are not 10 days in the week, or 11, but there are 7 days, because all the first 4 elements are, so to speak, before creation or within God's mind. Just like our own minds are hidden within our heads and they're not revealed to the outside, but someone can see our body language, which is the lower 7 forces. They come across through our bodies and our body language, so to speak. So the same with God. His head is hidden. The plan of creation is hidden, so to speak, before the first day of creation. But then the 7 days of creation follow this pattern. The first day was loving kindness. The second day was might. The third day was beauty, and so on. And then this is Saturday, Shabbat, Sabbath, the day of rest. This is Malchut. This is you let the world be what it is. God makes the world and works on the world and puts all of his energy into the world. But when he reaches the final stage, he lets go of the world and lets the world, let it be, lets the world be. And then the world can be something and grow and look for God and ask questions and so on. But the first 6 days, God is hands-on, working on the world, and there's no, and then he lets go of the world. So let's just go over very quickly. I don't know if you remember, but the story of creation in 6 days, what happens in those 6 days, and how understanding that these particular powers stand behind those 6 days suddenly shows you the deeper structure of what's going on there. So there are 6 days. The first day there's darkness and void and chaos, and God says only one thing. He says, let there be light, and he creates light, and then there's light and darkness. Second day, he takes the water. The water has been there from the very first day. It's mentioned. God's Spirit hovers over the water. And then he divides the higher water and the lower waters. Second day. Third day, the ground appears from the water and vegetation grows. Fourth day, the moon and sun are created. Fifth day, the fish and birds are created. Sixth day, the animals of the land and man and the woman. Now, if you look at this, it beautifully corresponds and goes together. That the first day was just an act of chesed. Chesed, again, is grace or love. And it's just an act of love to create the world. And many interpreters say that the entire world was created on the first day. In the beginning, God made the heavens and the earth. The heavens refers to all spirituality, the earth to all physicality, and everything. And just creating light, there was darkness, and then there's light. That's love. Love is when you light up the darkness. So the first day is just creating light. The second day, God divides the water. And he says, this is the water that has to be in the sky, and this is the water that has to be below. And he creates a space, and he cuts them apart, tears them apart. And he makes a border. He puts in the horizon, so to speak. And he creates, this is might. Might is creating borders. The left hand that pushes away, pushes the lower waters away. And according to a traditional story, then the waters began to cry because they long to be in the heavens, and this is why they're salty. And it has to do with the fact that all material energy, its deepest essence is longing to be reunited with its source. But this is might, this is pushing away. It's the opposite of creating the world. And there's something very interesting and strange about the second day, which is in every day God says, and God saw that it was good. And God created light, and he saw that the light was good. And every day you have it, except Monday, except the second day. He never says it was good, because it doesn't appear to be good, because might is an energy that creates distance, not proximity. It doesn't put things together, it takes things apart. It's a very important force, but it appears to be negative. The second day ends, the world goes to sleep saying this was a bad day. thinking was a bad day because God never said, and God saw that it was good. But then something interesting happens on the third day. On the third day, God says twice it was good. One for the previous day, and one for today. Because only when you reach the third stage do you realize there was something important about the previous stage. So let's just say something about this dynamic. This whole dynamic of going right, left, center is at the basis of what Hegel called thesis, antithesis, synthesis. You have one element that simply comes, and it has a vision, it has an idea, and it shines. And like chesed, love, let's love everything, let's love everyone. It's a very powerful concept. And it expands. And then comes another balancing, antithetical energy. And this antithetical energy says, hold it right there, you don't want to love everyone. You need to be careful. Some people, maybe in their soul group, they're perfect and divine and full of light, but right now they're doing bad things for some reason. And also if you think everything will be happy and you're not prepared for tomorrow, it creates borders, and it's realistically approaches the world and it sees the darkness as real. He doesn't want us to light it up, he wants to see it as real before you turn it into light again, before you find the goodness within the bad. So a famous historical example is Prime Minister Chamberlain wanting to have a peace contract with Hitler. And the Churchill coming along and realizing your goodwill is very nice, but that's not what we should do right now. Now we should fight. And realizing there's a time for peace and a time for war, or there's a time for closeness and a time for distance, and a time to separate. And also when you raise a child, you want to love him, but you want to give him borders. So this balance comes from chesed and then gvura, loving kindness, and then might, borders, distance. It's not good. But then you need a synthesis. Then you need to go to a third element, which is neither this nor that, it's neither right nor left. And it has to do with being in the center, and it's lower than the first two. There's less energy to it in a way. It's because when things are balanced, you don't go to this extreme and this extreme, but I like extremes. Extremes make me feel extreme. They make me feel like I'm doing extreme things. But this says, no, not too much to this and not too much to that direction, but there is something about the middle Sefirot, the middle channels, that they reflect the original crown more than the more extreme and more powerful sideways going Sefirot. So I feel an urge to go in one direction, then another urge to go in another direction. Then I try to balance them. Something third appears, and it's not as extreme. It doesn't pull me in each direction. It pulls me towards my center. But this is connected to my deepest root. So it's a very simple but very deep dynamic that says that this is how everything should operate. You should first have a very clear, general, powerful, all-encompassing vision of what you want to do, but then you need to let that go, and you need to go into the details and the practical details and see how much the world needs it or doesn't need it, and how you can do it, and how it's going to look like, and what you can't do. And you need to consider this very seriously. And if you go too much in each direction, you lose something very precious. If you go too much in the direction of the original intuition and the vision, then it doesn't stick well to this world. If you become too much of a realist, it's like an optimist and a realist, or a visionary and a practical man. And if you're too practical, you lose sight of the vision. And you're lost in the details, and you're lost in and then you become a pessimist, you don't become a realist. If you're a realist too much, you become a pessimist in the end, if you don't hold on to the optimist. Interestingly, the pessimist is not to be found here. The right-hand Sefirot are very optimistic, and the left-hand Sefirot are very realistic, and the pessimist is maybe here, he's outside of the picture. And you need to find a balance between this optimism and this realism, and connect them into something that balances both. So let's say I want to teach a class, and I have this vision, I want to teach a class, and I make a poster and I put it up. But then maybe I don't know the place too well, I don't know where to hang the posters, I don't know what to do, and it's not advertised so very well, so then it's only a few people come. But then I make the balance, and the balance is, so this is what happened, and it's no coincidence, and this is what I was able to do. Maybe in the next round, it'll be better. This is why this triad goes again and again. And even when it reaches the Malchut in a way is like the kettle, the crown of another round. And we can go through this, but the dynamic is what's important right now, that if we don't understand all these concepts, that's okay, but the dynamic is something very deep. That you need to hold on to the right-hand Sefirot are connected to the higher light. They want to have this light and they want to put it into the world. And then the left-hand Sefirot have to do with the reality speaking and telling you what you can and can't do. And then you want to connect them. So again, let's go over the days of creation. So Chesed is creating light, and Gvura, might, is dividing the waters. And then Tiferet, he's saying, wait, you thought it was a bad day? It wasn't a bad day. It was wonderful because now we have a space between the lower waters and the higher waters, we can have vegetation. And then you have twice, it was good. Suddenly you retrospectively realize that the second day was also vital, it was important. You needed to have this tearing apart of the waters in order to have a space, in order to have life. Then the third day, the day in which the moon and the sun were created, well, the moon and the sun, that's just like the creating of the light. In the first day, there's a correspondence between this first day, second day, third day, and this is fourth day, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So Wednesday, the fourth day, is connected to the first day. The sun and the moon embody the light and the darkness from this day. On the fifth day, it's the fish and the birds. The fish and the birds fill up the higher waters and the lower waters of the second day, of Monday. And then Friday, the day in which the animals and human beings were created, that populates the ground and the vegetation that were created on the third day. And so it's the same dynamic repeating itself, once in a broad way and the other in a more particular way. First you set up the stage, light and darkness, higher waters, lower waters, the ground, the earth. And then you populate it in 3 days so that you make it more practical. And then there's one thing missing. There's a very strange verse. In the end of the story of creation, it says that God finished making the world on the 7th day. But we know he finished making it on the 6th day, and the whole point of the 7th day was a day of rest. So the Jewish sages ask, how can it be that he finished working on the 7th day? That's not observing the Sabbath. So they say, yeah, there was one thing missing to the world. God needed to let go of it, to let it be. So by letting it be, he finished it. So the first act, the final act of finishing a painting is not the final brush stroke. The final act is lifting up the paintbrush all together. And this is Malchut. Malchut, the 7th, the sabbatical, the letting go, it's picking up the paintbrush and not touching the painting anymore. And this is when a child grows, and at some point you tell him, no, you're on your own. And you're not a parent anymore, you're not a parent in the educating sense, but this is the ultimate parenting step, is when you tell your child you're free to choose what you want. Or the bird kicking out its own little bird and telling now it's time to fly, and finishing a book and then publishing it and now saying now it's not mine anymore, it belongs to the world, and sending it off. And this is the final act here, and this lets the world choose. It lets So again, this can be God creating the world and finally letting go, and it could be us creating whatever it is we're here to create and do, and then we have to let go, and then it grows, then it becomes what it should be, what it was meant to be from the very beginning, what it was meant to be when it was back in our own superconscious, in the root of our soul. The root of our soul, before it entered the body, had a will, a desire, a plan, a vision. It still has it, but it's up here. And then we need to internalize it, and we need to develop it cognitively and emotionally and practically, and sometimes it could be in another order. And then we need to let it be, let it go, let it grow. And now maybe it creates room for another seed to be planted from our superconscious to our consciousness. And again, go through this process. Again, there are other processes, but first we have to understand the basic linear one. So now we want to understand a little bit each word, what it means, what it says, and what it means in the soul. So again, Keter is something we're unconscious of. And yet, we need to be conscious of its existence. And it's not the same thing. I cannot know what's in my superconscious. It's the deepest self that I have. And it's a point in which my self is connected also to its purpose in this world and to its divine source. And it's mysterious even for me. I can't fathom what it is. But it's like a light that I want to shine and I want its light to seep into my consciousness. You know, sometimes, mostly you go into a room and the windows are on the walls and the light comes in from the sideways. But every once in a while you go into a room that has a skylight. There's a window in the ceiling. And you have this very strange, unusual experience of having sunlight come into a room from the top. We have sunlight coming from the skies all the time, and we have artificial light coming from the ceiling, and we have sunlight coming from the windows, but going into a room with the skylight has something very powerful sensation to it, architecturally. So this is like an image of what happens when you remember that you have a superconscious. When you remember that your soul is more than what you experience and feel. There's something above. You open a skylight and suddenly a ray of light comes in. You can't see the sun, but you see the ray, you feel the ray of light coming in. You're feeling more inspired, more connected. And so opening up this, just being aware of it and walking around knowing that I have this metaphysical crown above my head, and I want to be in tune with that crown. And one of the most beautiful things that is described is that all the Sefirot speak, but the crown sings. The crown is a poet. It's not prosaic. It's not prose. It's poetry. It's all poetry. The soul is very poetic, and it sings, and it has a song. And if you listen to the song, you can live a poetic life. You can turn your life into a work of art. And a simple sort of metaphor for this would be a musical. In a musical, something very weird happens. You have people who appear to be normal and sane, and they appear to know what they're doing. But when they feel something deep, they suddenly have to sing. And it's not perceived as weird in the musical. People go along with it. The whole street starts singing with them because they identify with their love song or sadness song. But most of the play or the musical is a regular dialogue. But every once in a while, when there's an important thing to say, and when something meaningful needs to be expressed, it's expressed via a song. And the whole stage sings suddenly. So the idea is that most of our life are prosaic, but there is a poet within us, or a singer, or a musical star, and he sits at the Keter. And when something meaningful happens, then prose cannot capture it. A friend of mine once showed his father never liked poetry. He was a very prosaic sort of man. He was a rabbi, but a rabbi that deals with different laws and boundaries and all. It's very technical. But the son was a poetic person. He likes poetry. So he showed his father a book of poetry, and the first thing the father said is, why does it have so much white space? It's a waste of paper, it's a waste of space. You should write this, take all. But of course this is a very important part of poetry, is what is not said. Poetry is an attempt to say things which cannot be said, and then you say them in a roundabout way. You sing them, you go around them, and you leave a lot of white space because you want the reader to experience the fact that more is unsaid than what is said. And this is, all these are glimpses of the crown, glimpses of the ketel, of the superconscious which is beyond words and beyond. It sings and it's a poet and it's light and it's light that doesn't go into vessels. Vessels is regular words, rational, ordered words and forms and formulas and structures, but the ketel cannot go into it. A ketel, it's called a surrounding light because when you pour water into a glass or a cup, and at some point the cup is full, then it overflows and then it stays around it. This is the crown. The crown is all the energies and lights of our soul that cannot enter the cup, and so they're here, they're around it, and they could be huge. You could be a swimming pool that has been poured into a tiny cup. Most of the swimming pool is still outside. It's around the cup. That's the crown. It's one Sefirah here, but it's infinitely bigger than all the other ones. It's all the potential creative energy that you have. And it's on top of your head, and it wants you to open up the skylight. In the Song of Songs, written by King Solomon, a love song within the Bible, then at some point the lover knocks at the door of the woman. He courts her, and he comes to her home, and he knocks on the door, and he says, please open up. My sister, my wife, my dove, my only one. He says 4 words, and he says, open up, my head is full of dew, and I'm out here in the cold, and my hair is now full of dew because I'm waiting for you to open.
Dew? Is it under the water?
Dew is the water that comes in the night and accumulates on the plants. It says, my hair is full of dew from standing outside here at night time, and please open up the door for me. But the woman says, I am already in bed. I don't have the strength to change my clothes. And then he goes, and then suddenly she misses him. She says, oh no, what have I done? And then she runs out and looks for him. So he came and he went, and the image here is that the lover knocking on the doors of the woman he wants to woo or marry, that's like the superconscious, the root of our soul, knocking on the outside of our skull, telling us, open up. I have a lot of dew, there's a lot of water, there's a lot of plenty that I want to give you. And the dew, as opposed to rain, rain is something you see and you hear. Oh wow, it's raining, I hear it's raining. But dew is silent. And you wake up in the morning, suddenly the grass is full of dew. Where did it come from? It's very silent, it's quiet, it just comes along. And the same goes for the deepest things are quiet and they're silent and you don't see them coming. And you need to quiet your own thoughts in order to hear them. It's a voice that whispers. And the whispers are the deepest voices that you have in your head. But you need to quiet all the noisier voices. And this means listening to the keter. The keter is a surrounding light. It's a superconscious. It's above your head. But it whispers the most important whispers there are. And you need to open up to those whispers. Now, Chokhmah and Binah are 2 ways of taking the seed or the drop of dew that they perceive and developing it. So wisdom is the point in which this flash of inspiration enters my consciousness. I have a flash of inspiration, I perceive something. I see it all at once, but then it's lost, like a dream that I can't remember, or like a vision that I felt it for a moment, and can you describe it? No. Do you understand it? No. I'm not in the stage of understanding it. I'm in a stage it's a flash of wisdom that I experienced. Where did I get it from? I don't know. I got it from my superconscious. I heard something, I saw something, I read something, I felt something, and suddenly it echoed something deep within me, and I felt something for a minute, and it was very important. I need to hold on to it. Chokhmah is likened, Chokhmah and Binah, like a father and a mother, and the idea is that the father only gives one seed, one sperm, but then the mother takes it and it takes 9 months to develop it. And this is what wisdom and understanding do. Wisdom operates in flashes. But that flash is very crucial. That flash captures everything in it, but it's still undeveloped. And the image given is of a lightning bolt that strikes. At the moment that the lightning bolt strikes, you see an entire landscape in 1 second, but then it disappears and it's all black again. But you saw everything. You saw, but you didn't see the details. You don't understand what you saw. You can't draw what you saw. And then when you recreate that image, this is understanding. It takes far longer. It's like 9 months versus 1 instant. It's the mother's work, the mother within me, the pregnancy within me. Now I have to work and develop, and it's also a work of developing. The womb takes a seed and unfolds it and develops it into a process. It was all there, in a way, or at least in the seed of the father and mother together, in the fertilized egg. It was all there, but it's just an egg, it's not a human being. And then understanding is working and thinking and unfolding and understanding and following one thing. And you have some axioms, you have some intuition, you have some vision, you have some idea, and you open it up. So again, you can see that Chokhmah, wisdom, comes from above. The right hand, Sefirot, is a vision, it's an idea. And then Binah says, okay, but how can we, if the seed does not enter a womb, it just spills. Nothing comes out of it. So you can have a lot of ideas, but nothing will come out of them. And this is how nature works. Sometimes a fish gives birth to 100,000 eggs, and only a few will live. But this is how nature works, and this is how even when a man and a woman unite, there are really millions of sperms, but only one of them fertilizes the egg, and that's okay. You may have a lot of ideas, that's wonderful. But you need to take one and develop it, and this is when you begin to do something meaningful. So the Chokhmah, wisdom, is where you have all kinds of ideas, and also not all of them come from the kettle. They could be coming from all over the place. But you need to find the one that has a divine spark to it. And then you work on understanding what you perceived. And whereas wisdom is more like a flash of lightning that you see everything all at once, Binah is more like hearing. When you hear something, you don't hear it all at once. You hear one note, then another note, then another note, one word, then another word, then another word. Like thunder. It's gradual, it comes later, it's slower. Thunder and lightning.
And lightning is like you draw it like this. It's like, oh, it's like the same.
Yeah. Yeah. So the lightning is all at once, and you see something very powerful. Just light. I see what you mean. You see it all at once. But then thinking about it gradually, saying, okay, so it differentiates into A and B and C and D and levels and stages, and I can't do it all at once. And I had this idea, I want to turn it into a book, but then I need characters and a plot, and I need all kinds of things, and then it opens up. Sometimes it goes the other way around. You try to understand, you read a book, you don't understand what it says, and you think about it. You go from understanding to wisdom, not the other way around. When you have a flash of insight, then you want to develop it, that's moving. Do you also compose music?
What? Yeah.
You compose?
Yeah. Mostly like improvisation.
Improvisation.
Yeah.
But sometimes it could start with, you hear a note, you hear something, and then and then you try and play with it, and it comes forward. But sometimes there are other things that you listen to a music that was composed by someone else, and you say, I feel that there's talent here and genius here maybe, and you read a book and you try to understand what is really this book about. So then you move from understanding to wisdom. You try an understanding and break it apart and think about it, and you don't just read it, you think about it. And then at some point, suddenly you get what the book is about. And this is wisdom. Then the flash of insight comes after the process of hearing or listening to the details and thinking about it and comparing them and building them into a structure. And then suddenly you see what it is. You put one piece and another piece and another piece like a puzzle, and then you see it for what it is. So this is moving from, so wisdom has to do with a general understanding of, a general perception of things, and understanding with understanding in its particulars, not the full picture, but its details. When you listen to one detail after another. When you step back and look at something, you see it for what it is as a whole. And when you create and when you listen, you should have both. You should go back and forth. Like a painter, when he's close to his painting, he sees every brushstroke, but every once in a while he has to go back, see the entire picture, and then go again and work on the details. And if you would be just into the details, you don't see the forest for the trees. And if you just stand on the back, you see the forest, but you don't see the trees. You don't see the trees for the forest. And these two elements have to do with. Now, of course, the highest form of wisdom comes from learning revealed divine wisdom. It could come from you. Some things definitely come from you. Like I said, your mission in life and your inspiration and understanding and creating something. But the highest form of wisdom, connecting to the highest form of Keter, is when you're connected to a true spiritual wisdom that you can learn from, that you can draw from. And of course, according to Kabbalah, this is the Torah. This is what the Torah signifies. It's both the different books of Torah and, more broadly speaking, divine wisdom as it comes across through this channel. So this is you can live your whole life without having this inspiration, but if you want to really connect to your Keter, to your superconscious, to your root soul, then you need a source of divine wisdom that would awaken your wisdom, and then you work on understanding it. So for example, I learned all these concepts for some years now, and I didn't invent them. They come from a higher source of wisdom. I'm here trying to understand them. And every once in a while I get a flash of insight on what it all means. And it tells me something deep about the world and about myself and about all of us and about what we should do. But this is, now what do we need Da'at for? What is the fourth Sefirot? And this is where we'll end today. Why do we need the third element? Why do we need this dynamic?
Sorry, I think I'm too tired.
That's okay.
Do you want to donations or?
Yeah, basically it's $250 for the class. Yeah, but
exchange.
don't have maybe you have change.
I think I have to email you.
Yeah, 50.
Can you explain that last bit? Basically, the world means. The third.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Sorry.
That's okay.
See you.
Cheers.
So, why isn't it enough to have one perspective and another perspective? If you need balance, you don't need something third. You need to you see the world from the top down, you can see the whole vision, the whole idea, and then you also look at the details, and then you work between them, you go back and forth. But the idea is that in order for the crown, the Keter, the will, the original vision, doesn't lean towards the right or towards the left. Both the two Sefirot, each one projects one element of it, but there's still its very essence isn't to be found, it's to be found neither here nor here. So you need something third. You need, it's like the ingredient X. It's something that has to do, and knowledge, the word knowledge, both in Hebrew and in English, has to do with union, the union of man and wife. Adam knew his wife Eve, to know a woman, carnal knowledge. So knowledge has to do with uniting with something, with connecting with something truly. There's something about both Chokhmah and Binah, wisdom and understanding, that's a bit too intellectual, it's too from afar. But the knowledge, suddenly you connect to what you're studying or learning or doing in a far deeper way that combines both its general essence and its particular details, both its vision and its practical application. And when you realize it's like giving birth to the child. You had the seed coming from the father, Chokhmah, and you had the pregnancy coming from the mother, Binah, but then now you have to give birth to the child itself. And when the child comes out, and you see what it looks like, and when you attach yourself to what you're doing, you don't just do it from the head, then suddenly the channel between Da'at and Keter, knowledge and crown, opens up. And this is where Keter is first truly revealed. Keter is truly revealed when you know something, not in the sense of knowing information, and not in the sense of understanding, and not in the sense of grasping what it generally means, the moral of the story and so on, is when you suddenly know it in a deeper way. And this is why Da'at leads from the intellectual level to the emotional level. Only when you feel, when you sense what you learn, can you say that you know what you learned. You had a glimpse of wisdom, and then you had a process of understanding, and then you go back and forth, but suddenly there's a click, and the click is when you feel that you touch what you learn, and you also feel that what you learn touches you. It bears upon you. Some border has collapsed between me and it. And then something in my soul feels, okay, now I got something new. Now fully a drop of inspiration from the Keter. It went through this complex channel of right, left, and center, but then suddenly it appears. And also, every major decision made in life, you don't know what the future holds. You have a major decision to make. Where are you going to live? Who are you going to marry? What are you going to do? And every decision, you have to go back and forth between these two parts of your psyche. But when you find that, then there's a moment that you sense the essence of what it is you're supposed to be in this world, at least right now, and then you're able to make a choice, and you can wholeheartedly let go of the other options and choose it, and then your soul smiles. And the Keter says, this is what I wanted. So I'll give a very simple example of this. There's a company based in the United States, and it wants to create a branch in India. And it sends a messenger, a representative from America to India, and this is wisdom. The wisdom represents the vision. And he doesn't know India, he doesn't know the Hindi language, he doesn't know the Indian culture, but he has a mission. The mission is, I want to set up a new hotel or a new business or a new branch for my boss. I know my boss's vision, but my job is to implement that vision in India. So he comes here and he says, okay, I have this idea, and he starts talking to the locals, and they tell him, well, it's interesting, but we think about, you can't do it with these colors, and you can't do it with this logo, or you can't do it with this approach. You need to work differently, you need people to act differently, because this is our culture. And then he has this Indian fellow, and this is understanding. He understands this world. He doesn't, I don't know your vision, but I know this world. And I can tell you how to do this. And they frustrate one another because the representative tells him it needs to be like the original. And the understanding says that the original doesn't work here, you know. This is the different world, it's a different language. You have to speak the language. You have to know the sensitivity. If you do a certain gesture, here it could be a rude gesture. Here it could be something that doesn't work. You need to do something else. Or another example would be an architect and a contractor, right? Kabbalah is contractor. The architect has a plan, and it's on the page. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. But the contractor tells him, you can't do this here. You have too many rocks. You have too much sand. And it costs more than you think. And you don't have the material available in this country. You need another material. And so Binah understands this world, and it wants details. And wisdom understands the vision, and it doesn't want details. It doesn't like the details. But meanwhile, the boss is waiting for something to happen. And they have to work together. And then when they work together, they suddenly build a building. And then each one of them is a little bit frustrated. Because the local fellow, the understanding, it's too foreign. It's a US business coming here. It's not, we Indians do things differently. But also the representative, the US representative is also frustrated. Because he says, he doesn't look like the ones at home. But then the boss comes to visit, and he says, this is exactly what I wanted. The keter, the will, the original will of the soul, didn't want a perfect copy of itself. And it didn't want the realistic reality, the uncultivated reality of the world. It wants to do something with the world, but it wants a true and sustainable and balanced combination of its own vision and what the world can accept. It doesn't want a light of chaos to break the vessels, and it doesn't want vessels without lights. Right? Wisdom brings light, and understanding builds vessels. But the keter wants both. The keter wants the lights within vessels, or the lights of chaos within vessels of rectification. And the right-hand Sefirot bring the light, the vision. The left-hand Sefirot bring the vessels. And the middle Sefirot say, well, this is the way to combine them. And the father, the king, the boss, the will of the soul says, you're both wrong. You're both right and you're both wrong. That's what it tells the Sefirot, the right-hand and left-hand Sefirot. And the one in the middle, he got it right. He understands me. He got me. The power that is able to combine them and make it work, which means not being too much of an optimist and not being too much of a realist and not being too tied up to your original vision of things, but not being also too tied up to how the world says things should be. Both are wrong and both are right. The world has a point to it. The world tells you you can't do whatever you want. There are limitations. There's physical reality. You need an engineer. You need to have a sense of reality. You need to know what's going on here. And the other side of you tells you, no, I'm not going to bow down to anything. I'm going to do whatever I see in my head and my heart and my vision. I'm going to follow my heart and follow my vision. I'm not going to listen to anyone else. That's also a very destructive way to live. And you need to listen to both very carefully. If you lose sight of your vision, you lose sight of yourself, of what you were meant to do here, and then you get lost in reality. And if you only listen to reality, so this is only listening to reality. And if you only listen to your heart and your vision, you become detached. You become someone who floats and moves and no one understands him and he's not able to do anything meaningful. And you face this in every step of the way. That you have your own intuition of what should be, and then you have the world telling you what you can and can't do. And you really need to listen to both. And then that knowledge is, okay, now I know, not only can I find a way, it's not just a compromise. That appears to be a compromise. But the compromise, when it's well done, but it's not just a compromise, it's a combination of extremes.
Transcends.
And then it transcends both of them. And you need inspiration from the kettle in order to connect wisdom and understanding. So you have one guy is listening to this teacher and listening to that teacher, and then he realizes you have something and you have something, but then I realize something that is a combination. And this is that, and then you can combine it. So,
Excellent.
it takes a while to feel the flow of these, all these concepts, but I tried my best to focus on the first four and the first dynamic,